Hi there, I'm Shawna Robins, founder and CEO of Third Spark, and today I'm doing an Authority Magazine interview, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Elie Gottlieb. Dr. Elie Gottlieb is a sleep neuroscientist with a decade of experience across industry and academia, including Johnson & Johnson, Sleep.AI, and the Florey Institute for Neuroscience. Dr. Gottlieb is currently head of applied sleep science at Sleep.AI, where he guides global technology brands through the full R&D and product development life cycle, creating continuous, proactive, and personalized digital health experience. All right, Elie, I can't wait to talk to you about sleep trackers. Thank you
Thank,
for joining me.
thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat about something we're, I think, both pretty passionate about.
Yeah, sleep. All things good, sleep. So, talk to me about how you got into this line of work. What's your background?
Yeah, so my background is really in, as you mentioned, sleep and circadian neuroscience. I've worked really at this like intersection of sleep biology and behavior change and consumer sleep technologies in a range of different, settings, whether that's academia, a more clinical setting, and now in the sort of health tech front. But really, my story sort of started almost 15 years ago in the sleep space, where we were one of the first to actually look at the effects of blue light on sleep. And that was kind of this moment where I realized that sleep isn't just this like lifestyle topic. It's this true biological system that really touches everything from, especially a lot of the data now on light. It touches mental health and cardiometabolic risk to brain aging. And so I got really obsessed with this idea of like, how do we turn the science of sleep and circadian health into tools that people actually use and they actually benefit from in real life. And that is what sort of started this passion project of leveraging consumer sleep technologies to not just measure sleep, but also improve population sleep health.
Hmm. Okay, so give me a background on what Sleep AI is all about and what they're doing.
Yeah, so we're a sleep technology platform. We're a B2B company, so we're working with some of the largest health and wellness brands out there that want to integrate sleep data, sleep insights, and sleep improvement into their existing platforms. So we collect data from 500 plus wearables and devices, so we're data agnostic and product agnostic.
And I didn't know there were 500 different wearables.
You wouldn't believe
Wow.
it's an insane number of devices. You got, different brands and different models. And so there's quite a few. And so our ethos is like, well, that data is useful and valuable. So we do some harmonization on that data to make sure that your Aura and your Garmin, one of which is, based on PSG studies, better accuracy, they're still giving you a similar reading because that's the problem right now. You look at five different wearables, they're all saying different things.
Hmm.
So we harmonize that data against our own gold standard that's been benchmarked against PSG. And then we leverage that objective data as part of our advice engine. So we'll talk about orthosomnia later, but
Mhm.
what we're finding is that, data alone is likely not sufficient for improving sleep for most people. If it's just a data mirror, right, where you're saying you got 4 hours of sleep last night, Godspeed, that's just not good enough. So what we try to do is we go beyond just the data to actually leverage that to provide actionable recommendations
Hmm.
to users. So that's based on behavior change frameworks, CBTI-ish. It's not as hyper programized as CBTI. The adherence rate for CBTI, even though it is the gold standard for insomnia treatment, it's quite low. So we take a more adaptive and personalized approach. That whole process was backed by a randomized control trial. Data and science, especially as the head of science at the company, is really important. And that entire platform is also now fully reimbursed in Germany as part of their preventative health measures. So now all 74 plus million, insured people in Germany have access to that to put into an app and can be fully reimbursed for it by the German government.
Wow. I'm kind of jealous. I feel like the US is a long way away from that.
Absolutely. We need to do much more on the preventative health side. And not just the preventative health side, like, this current administration said they want everyone in the United States to wear a wearable, which I think is useful and valuable. Of course, we're in the consumer sleep technology business and platform, but again, data alone is not going to do it. We need to go beyond the data and actually provide some evidence-based recommendations to users beyond what's currently available.
Yeah. Oh, I understand that. That's part of why I have the job that I have. That's what I
Yes,
do, right?
absolutely.
Having that high touch, whether it's on your phone or on Zoom or someone that you meet with once a week, having that accountability, understanding sleep as a whole system. And then when sleep no longer is working in someone's life, understanding where the system is potentially broken and how to heal and repair it. I agree with you is such an important part of it. So talk to me about the notion that sometimes the data in wearables actually creates more stress and more anxiety
Yeah.
than if you didn't wear it.
Yeah. I think for a second, it's useful to just take a step back into like
Mhm.
how we actually got here. We're living in this age of the quantified self, where I always say we measure everything, but we change nothing,
Mm,
which is a weird place to be in. But that idea that you can understand yourself better through data, this has been around for quite a while. Since about 2007, there was a Wired magazine article, and this movement of the quantified self, it grew to over 100 groups, 30 plus countries. And the basic premise was that self-knowledge through numbers can be useful. And I absolutely agree with that, right?
mm.
That ethos is like permeated everything from
Sure.
step.
You check your blood pressure, you check your glucose, you check your, yeah, I mean, of course, right?
Yeah.
Having that
So
information at the in the palm of your hand can be really impactful for people.
that's exactly right. And so, this idea that, consumer sleep technology has some growing pains, which is what we're going to talk about with orthosomnia. It's in other platforms too. So, continuous glucose monitors are everywhere right now. And it's a really great parallel because there's actually some data around continuous glucose monitors actually doing the same thing, which sleep trackers might be doing, which is
Mhm.
that although they provide this like great self-management confidence and tool, they've also shown that in some vulnerable users, that constant data can paradoxically, right, increase worry and stress. So, I think what we're now finding is that we see something similar in the sleep space, where depending on the device, depending on the technology, some might be increasing worry and stress and anxiety related to that data. And actually, there's some recent data showing that it might not even be sleep tracker specific. You
Mm,
can have orthosomnia without a sleep tracker. In other words, you can become really obsessed and so too perfectionistic about your sleep without a tracker.
mm,
And that's where, this really started. This idea that you can become too obsessed, too perfectionistic about your sleep. And it was really just through a series of case studies in 2017 by Kelly Barron, where she found that some of her patients were coming to her with some sleep, Fitbit data, for example. And when she would say to a patient, look, your formal sleep study, it looked great, it looked fine, then the patient would say, well, then why does my Fitbit say I'm only getting,
ah,
40 minutes of sleep,
mm,
right? So this is where it all started. And since then, there's been quite a bit of hype around orthosomnia. A range of news outlets are covering it. And what we're now doing is convening a group of key opinion leaders in the sleep medicine space, the behavioral science space, and consumer sleep technology space to say, hold on, what does the data actually show when it comes to orthosomnia? What's the prevalence of it? What are some of the risk factors? And what can we do to change the technology, update the technology to reduce that risk?
all right. Well, I can see how helpful that would be for people. Actually, for me, I ended up taking off my sleep tracker because I found it to not, it was giving me data that I wasn't feeling in my body. It
Yeah.
was telling me what a great job I was doing with my sleep, but then I was still feeling exhausted for most of the morning. And I thought there's a disconnect here, and I'd rather just pay more attention to my physical system in response because something is not aligning. So do you find that that happens also with the data?
It's such a great point, right? Like, do we need, as someone working in consumer sleep technologies,
Mhm.
do we need that technology to tell us how well we slept from a
Right.
feeling perspective? And I will say, we know, especially in the insomnia space, there is something called sleep state misperception, and an overall misperception of sleep versus wake, where some insomnia patients will say, I didn't sleep at all. I didn't
Mhm.
sleep a bit. But when you actually do a full polysomnograph study on them, they did actually sleep 4 to 5 hours. They might have just been a lighter stage of sleep. Not to say we need to equip patients with insomnia with a consumer sleep technology, but it is to highlight how sleep is something that happens when we're not typically not conscious, right?
Right.
So
Right.
having a device that can give us a bit of an indicator as to the quality of our sleep is useful. However, what's really important is how we feel in the morning, right? Like we work with a range of companies that are coming to us to validate some of their technologies, whether that's, air purifier for
Mm.
optimal sleep or vibroacoustics, range of. And one thing we always say is like the hedonics of it, right? How it makes you feel.
Mhm.
That first and foremost, that needs to come first. Because if you're improving someone's deep sleep, let's say by 5%, but someone either thinks that they slept worse or the same, it's not a useful product per se. Not as useful as one that both improves your perceived sleep quality and
Right.
the objective. So, in short, I would say, you know, I think consumer sleep technologies can, and it depends on the accuracy, which we could talk about in a second.
Okay.
Some of them can offer a glimpse into our sleep that's otherwise very difficult to. But let's not forget that, that first 5, 10 seconds in the morning when you wake up, that actually can give you a pretty good indication as to how well you slept and how refreshed you are. You don't need to track your aura or your Garmin to see how refreshed you are in the morning. That's something that introspectively you can feel yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good point. All right. Well, and there's other key data in those sleep trackers that I think are important outside of the sleep too, like heart rate variability, resting blood pressure, oxygenation, saturation levels. Like there are other things in there that I think are important. And so if someone's going to track their sleep, great, but like those other things might actually give you a key indication of where your body's at that might be important. Even body temperature. I know when I started through perimenopause, it was like my sleep tracker was like, "You're too warm." I'm like, "No kidding." I
Yeah,
could have
no
told
duh,
you that.
thanks. Yes, shocker.
Yeah, exactly.
This is such a good point, right? And if anything, like there's almost an overwhelming amount of data. And what is, I think, more useful is how to connect those dots with behavior, environment, and other factors that are known to be what I call sleep permissive.
Mm,
So, for example, like, like if a device tells me that my HRV went up or down without any additional context, what then happens is, well, okay, I have to go back and think about, okay, what did I do yesterday? Or what, like,
was
people
I
have
more
to be
stressed? Was I less stressed? Yeah.
people have to be their own like subject matter expert. They have to have their own
Right.
PhD in physiology to
Right.
figure out
Right.
what that correlation was.
Right.
That's just not good enough. So you have some devices nowadays that where you log a behavior and then
Mm,
it'll give you some correlation. But what's I think even more useful is if there's an automated system that's intelligent enough to connect the dots for users that essentially says, okay, last night you had a meal at X time. That was associated with a worsening in HRV. Maybe tonight think of having a meal earlier.
mm,
We know your chronotype is a strong evening type. So, you know what? You can actually afford to have your dinner at 9 o'clock versus someone who's a strong early bird that's would maybe benefit from a dinner at 6 or 7. Like that level of contextual data is currently missing from most consumer sleep technologies. And as a result, again, people have to be their own subject matter expert. They have to, be their own behavioral science expert, and that's just not good enough. So we now have these like chatbots,
mhm.
which are gaining a lot of traction where they're better at connecting the dots. But again, the problem is, in order to get the right answer, I, as a user, have to know what question to ask.
Mm.
So in an ideal world,
Yeah. Give me what the future is going to look like on these.
yeah, yeah. So give me something like show me the data, but give me the context right at the top. Right? This is like user interface and user experience 101. Instead of me having to now go ask the chatbot what happened last night, have something in like pretty high fidelity detail right there. And
Mm,
then if I want something, additional context, I can ask the chatbot.
mm.
That we don't have that right now.
All right. So that's what's coming next.
That's what's coming next. I mean, I think there's this personal health model from Google where it's sort of collating that contextual data and providing recommendations to users. It's still not perfect, but that's a step in the right direction. Our own, I'll put a shout out to our own technology. The Sleep Score app uses some of that contextual data and goes beyond just the data to give recommendations to users based on that data. And there's a randomized controlled trial to support that. So I think, we have a lot of data on the accuracy of these consumer sleep technologies. We don't have as much data on the efficacy of them for improving sleep. And that's, I think, the next frontier. We've got some relatively accurate data apart from a few devices. Now let's move beyond that and do something with the data.
Wow, amazing. All right, well, thank you so much for everything that you're doing in the sleep space. I can see what a value this is going to be, and I'm excited for the future because, like I said, I gave up my wearable. But if it has all of these overlays on it, I can see myself going back to it.
Yeah, I hope we can get you back on with the right, contextual data and guidance to actually, go beyond the data and improve your sleep.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much.